Hey everybody, and welcome back to Kerbal Space Program RP-0. We are rejoining our whiskey resupply pod that is bound for Tremonia Station in low lunar orbit. We are just getting the flight computer stuff set up, and while we're here in some time warpy footage, really sorry about this episode being so entirely late. I had a lot of hangups this week. Didn't have my normal time to record, and had a bunch of infant hitting the breaker on my battery backup related issues, and some lost footage, and a machine that just refuses to act right after having the plug pulled on it twice in one day. Anyway, there's a solid light on our HG3. This is our orbital insertion bird. As we skim the surface of the moon, that will extinguish all of the liquid hydrogen, liquid oxygen contained within, and we'll come up on jettisoning that in, well, I mean, just a little bit. And yeah, kind of worked, although it really looks like not that well. We had to use a little bit of thruster power to pull ourselves away from the stage because our payload here is exceptionally heavy. But we'll just utilize our current pretty high uh, periapsis to correct our inclination. That burn won't take too much, although it's not ideal. It certainly isn't terrible. And then we'll start doing rough plots for when we can start to make an intercept. But, you know, these things will take time. So nothing initially. So we'll just go ahead and warp all the way around here and get our inclination sorted out here on our experimental lander engine. A little bit less experimental now. We should probably give it an official name at some point. The yeah, I don't know. I guess I'll defer that one to the designers of the engine proper. It seems only right that they should be able to give it a proper name other than the ELE. Or if there is one and I'm forgetting it, I really apologize. All right, there is our inclination change. So we're going to set up a maneuver node here at periapsis, and then skip it ahead many orbits until we can get to something that will grant us a close encounter with Tremonia Station, and it will take a whole lot of fidgeting around. Not my best work on this episode. Just so you know, all parts of this were filmed while I was in fact supposed to be babysitting or dadding, being a dad, whichever. But we do end up with something that's pretty close. We'll just time warp around, and of course, I will stare at the absolute wrongiest thing and end up warping quite a few days past that node, and then yeah. I was looking at Kerbal Alarm Clock because I was concerned about missing that node with Clarkson Alpha out in orbit of Uranus, to where we can possibly farm some new biome science. So I will just tinker this node a whole lot more here and there, and drive it around while being angry at myself for looking at the exact wrong number, even though I told myself, don't look at Kerbal Alarm Clock, look at your time to node, and then stared at Kerbal Alarm Clock while telling myself subconsciously to look at the node. But I think we can actually make something work here. It's just going to take some time, unfortunately, which kind of sucks for me because I was really hoping to get this done before we had to go pay attention to Clarkson Alpha. Um, this was just kind of not to be a thing. So we'll hit our jump to ship button and then find ourselves magically out here at Uranus, where we do have a since we made our inclination change, I should say, we are very likely here to encounter new and fresh, crispy biomes from which we can farm lots and lots of science. I made that node just because it looked like it was going to be the point at which we're most northernly above the planet. So figuring that would absolutely be a different biome, and it actually is. If you look down there in the corner, it says north bands instead of equatorial north. bands. I still have no actual idea how many biomes we have to work with here, but this is definitely not the equatorial bands we were in before. So we do have a chance to farm some more science. So after our radio in command goes through, we'll radio in a couple of things there. That's quite profitable. Now at our periapsis, it looks like that will be exactly where it was last time, so there's no point in waiting until we get there. We're going to try to set up this node to where we're under the southernmost point of our orbit around the planet. Yeah, we can just go ahead and delete that thing too. And then we'll try another radio in, see if we can't get more biomes here. And yeah, there is equatorial bands. And we'll pass very cleanly through this. I'm trying to take notes as far as where our different biomes are, and so I will set maneuver nodes to where a biome change is likely to occur. Kind of guesstimating there out on the far end side because it's kind of hard to gauge what our angle to the planet is at that point, but we'll try to work in what we can. And at the very least, maybe we can set up some nodes and then use Flight Computer to science spam at a given interval. So long as we're out here paying attention to the spacecraft, everything should be fine. And at some point, we will have a couple of days where maybe we can just follow it for an orbit and hope for the best. But now here at our southernmost point, I guess, in our orbit, we did get a very successful radio in and quite a view of the rest of the solar system. Now that we have regained contact with Earth, we can radio all that nice stuff in and get a couple hundred more science for the coffers. That'll be nice to spend on something. We're at a point in the tech tree now where really, like, that's going to be maybe 1 or 2 tech nodes, which the bonus will be nice, undoubtedly, but we can go ahead and jump back to our resupply pod now. So we'll hit jump to ship and hope for that something here will happen eventually. I'm sure it will. KSP just takes some time. There it is. Jump to ship. Apparently I just didn't click the thing well enough. Anyway, back here now with our resupply pod. I did pause the footage and go tend to the child and then forgot to restart it, but this is us making our burn to get ourselves on an intercept with Tremonia Station. As you can see, we have walked down several kilometers, although it's not quite good enough, so I'm going to plot a secondary node here and try to just refine that down a little bit, although I think I have it to a point where we can probably approach the situation manually. Having the node and just knowing where to point does do us a whole lot of good, so we'll just get angled in here, ullage, throttle up our engine, burn through that node, and then use the thrusters to walk down a little bit of this. Another tap on the engine just because, you know, hey, why not? But we do have our encounter down to just a couple of 100 meters at this point, so we'll try to work through that a little quicker. Yeah, 216 meters and the encounter in about an hour. So we'll time warp around 13.3 meters per second to circularize with our station. And that'll happen soon enough, although there was quite a long pause as we came into render range. And just before that, we'll go ahead and get angled in. A quick burst on the engine at low throttle to level that out. Brings us down to about 0.6 meters per second, and a lot of wiggling the camera around before we can finally find the station. Another quick tap just to get rid of the rest of that. We are really, really heavy, so using the engine to kind of correct for even less than a meter per second of speed, especially when you want to go the opposite direction, is a rational decision, I assure you. Yeah, it's kind of hard to justify those things. Anyway, here is our approach to Tremonia Station. All of the standard docking ports are full, so we're going to aim for one of the ports on our massively large fuel tank. The station jumping to the side as I bounce into physics warp because I have become impatient and I have an abundance of distractions. So I really should have shot for this docking port. We'll go ahead and switch to that real quick and retract the solar panel so as to not screw it up. but what I really should have done was used a roll control so that I didn't have to use 2 key commands at a time to alter on any given axis whatsoever. But yeah, I guess I'm just stubborn like that, I suppose. The approach was not the greatest, and again, we were really heavy and I was really distracted, so there's a whole lot of really bad flying here, and I'm kind of glad that I didn't do this part with a live audience, because, well, it's just, it's a little sad. There's a pretty serious bump. It looks so much worse in sped up footage. Yeah, remember, this is sped up about 8 times at this point, so the resulting rotation of the station and the ricochet of our resupply pod wasn't necessarily that bad, although it definitely looks it when you speed things up quite a bit. We actually didn't see a huge frame rate drop this time, which I can only hope is because we got rid of the radiator parts that were screwing things up, although the station does look a little bare bones without them. But instead of trying to realign and shoot for the other port, we'll just target a different port eventually. Again, very distracted. There were lots of times here when I actually had to get up and walk away from the computer while just leaving it running because we were, well, just kind of adrift anyway. So, you know, not that it mattered a whole hell of a lot. Yeah, there was a quick pause that I probably should have removed, but we're just not going to do that. I've had enough headaches trying to put this episode together already. I'm not going to go back and deal with yet another one. So, finally, getting ourselves somewhat in line with that port, although it will take many more corrections, and then also trying not to lose a solar panel on the nose of Dory there before we can start to get ourselves pointed in for this. So I guess while we're here and waiting another 1,000 years for me to actually pull off this docking, I might as well tell you about our plans going forward from this point. I think this crew will make one last deployment to the surface of the moon before they return back to the Earth. We will be cycling them out for a new crew, and yes, we will be keeping Rosalita Memorial Station on active status for at least another 2 years or so. We are going to take the lunar Uber to a very southernmost biome. As has been suggested to me, there's a place close to the southern poles of the moon that has several biomes very close to one another. I think 2 of them we've already visited before, but the poles and the major craters, I think we have not. So we're going to try to get ourselves as close to those as we can. And we're going to do so doing the plane change and the initial descent with this whiskey resupply pod. The rest of the landing on the back of the Lunar Uber 2. And then, of course, the ascent and return to Tremonia Station with that Lunar Uber 2 all on its own. Of course, it still has all of the sciencey gear packed into its cargo containers. We have a few extra goodies for it here in the cargo containers on this specialized whiskey resupply pod, as well as a landing leg replacement, which it so desperately needs, and hopefully we can get all the way through a landing and a takeoff without blowing up another landing leg. That'd be nice, wouldn't it, if we could not break this thing for a change? We broke it twice in one landing last time, so we'll see how well that goes. Anyway, I've kept a pretty close eye on the runtime for this resupply pod, and we have right about 5 minutes remaining before we start to push it past the red line into its past its 8 minutes of rated runtime. So we'll just we'll put a little bit of extra fuel in here. They're the 4 stubby leg tanks. I don't know what to call them. Those are locked, so those are not tallied in our Mech Jeb stats currently, so we will empty those into the station proper and use that fuel to refuel Dory and to refuel the Lunar Uber. There is a bunch of fuel in that massive tank that we were trying to dock to that just, for some reason, does not want to point in the right way, so we'll abandon the plan of moving the station to dock to the pod and go back to using the pod to dock with the station. Anyway, back to the plan. We are going to separate the Whiskey Resupply Pod and Lunar Uber 2 once it is post-repair. Dock the two together in orbit. Use the Whiskey Resupply Pod to make the plane change and then the initial deorbit and maybe even a good portion of the braking burn as we descend to the surface of the moon. When it is empty of fuel or the engine fails, whichever happens first, we will jettison it, pull a 180-degree turn, and then light up all 5 engines on the completely fueled Lunar Uber 2 to finish off the landing, which should leave it with more than ample Delta V supplies to take back off from the hopefully very targeted landing, wherever it ends up most likely, after the crew on the surface has collected science from at least 1 new, maybe even 2 new biomes, before they will lift off, get into orbit, make a plane change, and then redock here at Tremonia Station. And then finally, we have hard dock on our Whiskey Resupply Pod. So we'll transfer over what supplies were on here that we aim to get rid of, which is, of course, all of its life support stuffs, and then the fuel from the 2 stubby little legs. Anyway, I won't bore you too terribly much with all the fuel transferring, namely refueling of Dory, refueling of the Lunar Uber 2. We'll just skip to that off camera. But once we have all of the regular fuel supplies, we're going to take a quick lap. I will come back in a couple of days' time where we will be going on EVA because, of course, we need to collect a lot of things from this before we go ahead and put this plan into action. There's a couple of structural parts in one of these containers that we're going to need to build the science experiments onto, of course, because they have to be attached to the surface or something, or at least close to the surface. I don't know, maybe if we kick them hard enough we can get flying science too. You know, hey, why not? There's also some wrenches up here that it would be nice to have some spares on station just in case I forget one someday. So if we're going to keep those around, we should probably put these crates attached to the station with some mounts. Wouldn't that be nice? Much, much nicer, actually. So there's mount 1 mounted, and of course we drifted too far away to mount the crate. Eventually, after twice having to hit escape, we'll get that crate mounted, and we'll put the drills in there so that we can always have at least 2 sets of DeWalt tools on hand should we ever need to do some repairs on station here. And we'll just go ahead and move this second crate out of the way. Looking nice, almost lined up and stuff. And then, so these structural parts, we'll just put them in the first available container, and then of course we need to go fix our landing leg, and there's no point in just deorbiting the other 3 landing legs. We might as well keep them here on station, since apparently popping a landing leg is going to be a persistent problem for this vehicle. It would always help to have a few spares on hand just in case. So all the landing legs stripped from the Whiskey Resupply Pod. We're going to go ahead and pick one of them once, of course, we can get close enough to it and get it on and mounted to our Lunar Uber 2. And of course we'll get stuck on the thruster, so we have to abandon that shift and then try again. Excellent work. So now that we're most of the way around, we can finally get that at least on the correct pylon before we can walk over here and grab a ladder and very carefully put that landing leg in its correct place before reboarding the vehicle. Awesome. Looks like our EVA stuff is done, and we are ready to continue on mission and maybe gather some seriously good science while I try to find a good angle to snap a screenshot. Anyway, that's going to do it for this episode, everyone. Thank you so much for hanging out. I really do appreciate it, and I will see all of you in the next one. So until then, see you later.